We watched Rings of Power, Episode 8, so you know what time it is.
Hit that intro.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Awesome.
All right, guys, if it's your first time joining us, welcome. We're two dads who love all things fandom, from Star Wars to Star Trek, Marvel to DC, and Middle-earth on down to Westeros. We love it all, and we want to bring all of our insights and love of all things nerdy to you, our viewers. So if that's your cup of int draft, then we're here for you, and you should definitely subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on all of our amazing reviews and insights that we bring to all of our favorite fandoms. So thanks for tuning in, guys. My name is Chris Matthews, and I'm joined, as always, by the stranger and possibly Gandalf, Mr. Matt Parham. How you doing today, brother?
Glad to be here, man. Glad to talk about this ending. What an ending it was.
What an ending! Right? So, oh man, this episode was pretty awesome. This was episode 8, titled Alloyed, right? I'm saying that right? Alloyed?
Yes, yeah.
I know, I had
it's
a little
Lloyd.
Yeah, Alloyed. So, Alloyed, it's directed by Wayne Che-Yip and written by a bunch of people again. Jennifer Hutchison, J.D. Payne, and Patrick McKay. So the showrunners as well. So once again, guys, I looked up the Rotten Tomatoes score on this, and guess what? No critic consensus on this one. So we don't have a Rotten Tomatoes score as of yet.
Early.
I know, it just
early.
came out, so we're actually getting to record this pretty early, so I'm loving that. But the downside to recording early on it is we don't have any critic review or anything like that. So let's find out what these two dads thought about this episode. So what'd you think of this one, brother?
Well, man, this was quite a journey this entire season, and
Yes.
here we get final confirmation,
Right?
that Hallbrand's our
You
guy.
called it. You called it so early in the season, and so many. Like, I was on the fence, off the fence most of the season, and like last episode, I pretty much knew. I was like, "Yep, that definitely Hallbrand." And
Well,
here we go.
And I don't know if you were fooled by the beginning. I actually was.
I
Whenever
wasn't.
they said he was Sauron, I'm like, oh man. So I guess it was wrong. It's weird, all the rest of the stuff that I saw. But then as the credits, the opening titles were rolling, I started thinking about it more and more. I was like, nope. They do this in finales. Yep. They put out this sort of MacGuffin, or red herring is the right term. This red herring information to make the surprise that much more palpable once you get there.
Yep.
Once we hit that Rings of Power title card, I thought, I still think it's Hallbrand. And then, of course, he delivers to me the definitive line when he tells Celebrimbor that it was a gift.
Yes.
That was
it.
It's over.
Well, as soon as they went there, and I saw that they went to Elrond and Celebrimbor in Eregion, I knew. I was like, yeah,
we're there.
The only person that they set up this entire season, like all the threads were there, laid out, ready to go. It would have been such a waste and a horrible writing decision for them to just forget all that stuff and make the stranger into Sauron. So I knew right away that wasn't him. I was like, no way. Like these people, this little cult group thinks that it's him, but it's definitely not him. So I was glad that we got some vindication there. And Fatherly Fandom, we are 2 for 2 now with these shows for calling who the actual villains are.
Todd Hulk and
on
Hallbrand Sauron.
Yeah, that's right. And so it just made sense, and that was perfect how they set that up. I very much enjoyed that. I love that they had Nori come and save the stranger as well, and how they set this character up, which, can we talk about it right now? Can we talk about the fact that this is
I think so.
Definitely, Toucan Sam from Fruit Loops. Always follow your nose.
No, but I'm glad they put that in there because that's a classic line, and everybody think it's a Fruit Loops line.
Yeah, right. I was like, wow, he's the inventor of Fruit Loops. He's right. We thought it was Gandalf or Saruman or somebody or one of the Blue Wizards, but no.
Well, I was actually impressed that they didn't go as far as to name him.
They didn't name him,
calling him Gandalf. It still leaves me only very slightly suspicious that perhaps we're seeing a Saruman here, but I don't think it's going to go that way. I just thought maybe. Very, very minimal chance, I think, at that.
Yeah,
but,
and so in the books, Gandalf actually shows Saruman's the first one to show up. In the Third Age is when Gandalf does show up, and he actually travels.
Yeah, Saruman's older, and so I thought maybe
the first
kind of where we're headed.
First wizard there, and also in the books, so you have the two wizards that actually go out to the east, which is where they are headed now, where Nori and the stranger are headed. So I was kind of thinking, well, maybe they're treating this like, a written tale, so people didn't know that Gandalf was actually there. I mean, because he only interacted with the Harfoots and whatnot, so none of the main characters interacted with him. So maybe he's going off to the east, and then the start of the Third Age is when he comes back. And so that's when he introduces Gandalf, Mithrandir, to the elves as well. So maybe that's their way around this as well. What do you think?
Yeah, it could be, and we could end up just meeting Saruman over in the east, and he says that he's been there for a while or something like that. So
could be that situation too. We will see, but I absolutely I love the Harfoots and all of this as well. So I love their story, and that it was really well done in this episode. Having them save him, having him realize that he could be a force for good. He gets to make that decision for himself. Nobody gets to tell him who he is. I love that message in that. What did you think about that?
Yeah, no, I thought it was very on point with the type of morality that we get from Tolkien tales.
Yeah.
Whether, it be the collaboration. We see that in every single one of the stories, how people in these... just people in general, I think that Tolkien was trying to make the point that during his time in the war, it was obviously a group effort. He was drawn closely to the soldiers, his friends around him in the heat of battle, and they did what they had to do to further the cause of good. In his experience, and that's what we're seeing here. It's a classic narrative, of course, but I think it's important to Tolkien, or was important to Tolkien whenever he was writing all of this, and I think that in that spirit they're honoring his legacy. Now, of course, fans of the books and people that want this to be just a text-to-screen retelling of the Silmarillion and those sorts of things, which they don't have the rights to do, and we've talked about that before, are not going to be satisfied with this narrative. They're going to say, why was Halbrand not an elf? All the sorts of critiques. And I think it's warranted if that's what you were looking for, but from episode 1, this show has made it pretty clear that that's not what they're going to be able to do.
Yeah, and there were several reasons why they were not able to do that. One, legally they couldn't even bring up or discuss anything from the Silmarillion, so they couldn't do Anator, and they couldn't make characters the way that they were in some of the books that were outside of the Lord of the Rings or the appendices. So they had to come up with their own stuff and make it make sense within the context.
Halbrand can't even say those other names.
He can't, but he mentions I've been called many names and everything. So I think
that's as far as they can go.
That's as much as we can do with this one. But I think for the constraints that they were put into, they did an absolutely fantastic job with this story in trying to be respectful with Middle Earth and the literature that we have and the story that we have and Lord of the Rings as a whole. I think they did a good job of weaving that thread. And I know that other fans probably don't agree with me when it comes to that. And if you look at Sauron, if we're going to talk about Sauron himself, is he was never a human and everything. He was like an elvish thing, Well, he was a shapeshifter too, so he turned into a werewolf at one point. So he could turn into whatever he wants. He wasn't an elf, so he's part of the Maior,
Right.
and so he could make himself into whatever he wants. So it does make sense for that character to present himself as whatever he wants to get some sort of end goal that he needs.
And I think we're starting to see some semblance of that in how he was able to go into Galadriel's mind and show her things that weren't true. You know, come across as her brother, at least a memory of her brother.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens in season 2, because obviously this actor is contractually obligated to play this character.
Yeah, he's coming back.
So they can't necessarily... Right, yeah. They can't necessarily have him just completely gone from the show.
Yeah.
But you know, we'll have to see how they sort of make this right with the fans. Are they going to attempt to make it to give us some kind of reason of why Sauron isn't an elf, or why he does present as a human?
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll touch on that, but hopefully.
I don't know if they will. I think he'll probably present himself as this actor, as this human in the next season and so on. Because eventually this character does go back to Numenor. He's probably going to be the same character, and he's probably going to deal with El-Faraz. And it's going to be the same type of stuff that we see. Because we have this character's now established and everything, so I don't see them changing him up too much. And we go back to Numenor in this episode 2, and we see that the king has indeed died. And, you know, Queen Muriel is blind now, and so there's going to be a lot of tension going forward in that storyline. The one thing that was kind of weird to me was Isildur. They still didn't bring him up, and in the books.
I know. Where is he?
Yeah, in the books he actually returns to Numenor with them and everything, and then eventually flees Numenor whenever the doom comes, which I'll try not to. You guys, the books have been out for a long time, so Numenor gets destroyed. Sorry.
Right.
Spoilers.
Well, we've literally seen it in the show already with the waves. So.
Exactly. So that does eventually happen because of the stuff that the Numenorians do. They get deceived, and they try to go after Valinor. They want to go after the Valar and destroy them and take over and gain immortal life. So they want immortality for themselves. And those are the Kingsmen. And the faithful are the people like Elendil, which he kind of mentioned in this episode with Muriel and everything. He's like, well, my name means something else too, which is, elf friend is what Elendil means. And so they're kind of establishing that they're going to be a part of that faction, the faithful, that kind of revolts against that. And there's kind of that Civil War type of mentality that's going to happen in the next season of this show in Numenor that splits up the Numenorians. And eventually, if you guys didn't know, those Numenorians that are the faithful, they eventually come back to Middle Earth and everything, and they settle the lands and make Gondor and Anor in the north. So it's a big thing, and I can't wait to see how they do that. But we also get to see how some of the Rings of Power are made. What did you think about that, Matt?
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Again, the sort of off-lore inclusion of Galadriel's brother's blade.
Yes.
In order to, get... I thought that was great to pay off the arc that Galadriel's gone through.
For sure.
And, again, not authentic to the books, but the entire sequence was off, and that, Sauron wasn't really a part of it. He just kind of planted the seed and then left.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a great emotional payoff. I like that it was presented as this gift of information, as this collaboration.
Yeah.
But Galadriel was suspicious through it.
I like that too.
Kind of stuck to her gut instinct, pursued it more, and figured out the truth. What they do with that truth, though, to me, is kind of worrisome. With Galadriel definitely knows. Elrond probably knows.
Oh, for sure now.
What are they going to do with that information in season 2? Like, why would any other rings be allowed to be made? And
that's my question. Is like, I think that Halbrand, or Sauron, as we know him now, is the one. I think that he's going to make the rest of the rings, the 9 that go toward the dwarves and the 7 that go to the men and everything. He's going to make those ones, and the reason why these 3 rings were made by the elves, and they had to be done by the elves exclusively. So obviously we see in Lord of the Rings that the elves do not fall to Sauron. And so the rest of the dwarves, these dwarves do, the men do, they become the Nazgul. And so they all fall to Sauron except for the elves. And this is the reason why, is because they made these 3 rings by themselves. And Halbrand / Sauron is probably going to be making the other ones and gifting them to the other races. But you're right, Matt. Like, they know this knowledge at this point, but like, how are they going to spread this around? Are they going to go after him right away? What's going to happen with that character?
So my prediction is that Sauron is basically going to use the division that's already been created between the men, right? The Numenorians don't really like the elves now. The dwarves don't really like the elves now, and I think he'll use that to his advantage, saying, look, they've got these rings of power. You guys need your own.
Yep.
I know how to make them.
Oh.
Sort of thing.
I think you might be right. I mean, that might be where they're heading with this. And once they've established that, then he'll go to war, and he'll get captured probably by the Numenorians and sent back, and then cause some havoc in Numenor. So it all goes into that. So I wanted to kind of talk about these 3 rings of power, and like, you know, they use the mithril as well as the gold and silver from Valinor, from the dagger, to make these 3 rings of power. So we do have 3. The first one is Narya, which is representative of the element of fire. So if you saw like the rubies and everything, they were red, white, and blue. Narya is the red one. Ninya is the water one, which is the white clear one, and Valia is the air one, which is blue. And so Narya eventually goes to Gil-galad, the king there, and Lindon. Then it goes to Círdan, and then eventually Gandalf actually has that ring. You can see that ring on his finger in both The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Ninya actually goes to Galadriel, and then Vilya goes to Gil-galad at first, but then Elrond gets it. He actually gets gifted that ring from Gil-galad. And so those are the 3 rings of power for the elves and everything. And I thought it was pretty clever how they set that all up. And it'll be interesting to see how they use those moving forward. And for me, also, just bringing up Gil-galad, I kind of feel like they didn't do justice to this character. He comes off as kind of an asshole the whole time, and just
the whole time.
Yeah, and he's definitely not. He's a very powerful warrior that helped out the elves and the men as well. And like the final alliance and everything, he's actually there. And in the cutscenes in the original Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Rings by Peter Jackson, they have Gil-galad there, and he actually does battle Sauron, and he does eventually get killed by him. I think he gets roasted. He grabs him and he roasts him up there. But he was a good character. He was there with them, and you know, he was a good person towards Elrond. But in this show, they kind of make him out to be kind of a deceitful, arrogant guy that's like, well, I'm not going to give you 3 months. You just whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll take it off.
Yeah, he's basically tossed in the towel, and he doesn't want to hear any more of it.
Yeah, so I didn't like how they did that. So that's one little critique that I had for this episode and the series as a whole. So do we want to go ahead and get into our
let's go to our ratings. That's a good.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So what did you rate this final episode of the first season of Rings of Power?
For me, I really enjoyed pretty much most of the episode. I thought it was well done. I liked that we got a rounding out of the storyline. Even though, you know, we predicted some of that storyline, I think it was still developed well and paid off well, and that it wasn't just a flashbang reveal. Galadriel was suspicious and checked it out, and over the course of, you know, maybe 20 minutes there, figured it out. And we as an audience member, if people weren't clued into it yet, definitely figured it out with her. So I think that was well done. I think that once it was revealed, his power was shown and how deceptive he was. And I don't know about you, Chris, but I honestly felt like he was making some good points there for a little while and was, possibly going to reel her in. And I thought, man,
and bringing up the fact that like it shouldn't matter what our past is. That's what you were saying, and like we can make our own future. And like I want to do better, and I believe that Morgoth was destructive, and I just want to bring order to the world. I mean, it was all a really good argument from his side.
Yeah. So I thought all that was really well written and well acted. I would have liked to have seen what happened with Bronwyn and Arondir and Theo, but we didn't get any of that. And I guess, right, Isildur, and I'm guessing that we'll see a check-in with those characters in the premiere of season 2.
Yeah,
because it's just left hanging for too long. But so overall, I give this episode a rating of 9 out of 10. And what did you think of just this episode in particular? We'll do our series ratings after.
We'll wrap up with the series stuff. But yeah, once again, I'm gonna same as you, buddy. 9 out of 10 for me. I very much enjoyed it. I thought the through line of the storyline for Halbrand worked out very well. Like we discussed earlier in the season, I thought that was a very good writing opportunity for them, and a good contrast between Galadriel and Halbrand and that relationship, and it just seemed like everything lined up perfectly for that to be this character. And once again, I feel like they weaved in the lore as well as what they were constrained to do, and made this story into something that was, respectful of what we had before, but at the same time was different and left us guessing as well. So I very much enjoyed that. I liked, I mentioned this earlier in the episode too, that I liked the idea that Nori influences the stranger, that he is what he is and nobody can tell him what he is. That kind of idea, ideals that we see throughout Tolkien's literature is amazing and hopeful. And we as people are not all solely good or bad. We are what we choose to do and how we choose to act in this world. That's what matters most. And the same thing with Halbrand. It's you see that in the character as well. How he acted throughout the thing kind of reveals who he is. And because your actions speak way louder than words, and they kind of depict that in the show, and I very much like that. So for this episode, I liked it. I think we're set up for a good second season. I think there's going to be 5 seasons altogether of Rings of Power. I didn't like the fact that it did seem rather sped up. I felt like the forging of the rings and working with Celebrimbor should have been a lengthy process, should have been months and months and months of work or something like that. And it felt like that it was oh, we figured out how to do it. Okay. Oh, we made a mistake. Now we figured it out. Okay, we're good. Now we got rings. So
yeah,
it seemed like the answers and the solutions came very quickly. And so for me, I would have kind of liked to seen that slowed down a bit, or maybe moved into things. And I'm not sure too, another criticism, we kind of brought this up as well. I'm not sure if it was a good idea for them to know that Halbrand is Sauron. I kind of feel like we as an audience should have known, but I feel like he should have deceived them as well, and he shouldn't have been revealed in story at this point too, because it does lead us to wonder. It's well, how does he get away with any of this other stuff? Why aren't they, screaming it from the rooftops that this guy is Sauron and going after him and whatnot? And so it'll be really interesting how that plays out. And I believe that Adar is still alive too, right? So Halbrand is heading into Mordor at this time. So how's that going to go? Is Adar going to, switch sides or whatnot and be a good guy and fight against this new character?
I kind of think Halbrand's going to kill him.
He's got to,
I think he's
right?
just gonna,
but why didn't he do that before when he was captured as well? So that I was there's the little loose pieces that are very interesting. But 9 out of 10 for me for this episode. Let's go into the season as a whole. What'd you think?
Yeah. Season as a whole for me really comes down to what does it do for my experiences as an audience member for just this show, but also as a fan of the Tolkien books and movies. So I thought overall it was a great show. I loved the production value.
Yeah.
I loved how lived in a lot of these spaces felt, and in a different way than what we see in fandoms like Star Wars. Star Wars gives us the Old West sort of nitty-gritty type of space opera, and Lord of the Rings gives us different cultures with really finely detailed
Right.
and fleshed out architecture and costumes and
language, and
hairstyles,
culture,
just everything. It's amazing, and that detail was seen in the books, it was seen in the Peter Jackson stuff, and it's seen here as well.
Yeah.
So it's on point. To me, it's just an extension of that stuff. And so I've enjoyed it from the first episode all the way to the series finale here. So overall, for me, I don't know that this show could have done much better. I agree with you. They rushed some things here in the finale, and there was some clunkiness a couple of episodes ago. And I do think that they're losing me on the stakes with some of these characters because we're just kind of secure in that all the main characters are going to continue to make it. And it's not, again, I will reiterate, it's not like main characters have to die in order to keep a show interesting, but main characters can also grow and develop and do more things than what they started out to do.
Right.
I really think it's a brave choice to make the queen blind. Like whenever a show does that and they kind of give a character an injury or some kind of permanent thing that they now have to deal with, that changes the stakes. And I like those little details. I think it's good writing, and that you allow yourself the idea to make these characters vulnerable and then deal with it.
I like the fact that they made that a thing where it's like, we are part of the faithful, and that means that we're going to have to sacrifice quite a bit. But in the end, it will be worth it. And her losing her sight, Elendil losing Isildur, same thing. It's like they all have to are making these sacrifices for the greater good. And so I very much like that element of the show too.
Yeah, so and I think that it's paid off with those characters. With some others, it hasn't. It felt like we just got into situations that should have been basically no good outcome would come of it, and somehow they made it out. And I almost feel like that's going to be the case with Isildur, because obviously he survives. Obviously he is in good health at some point, but he just had a whole burning building collapse on him.
Right.
And is going to get out of it somehow. So for me, those types of things make it feel slightly inauthentic to the story that's being told with the stakes that are there. So for me, that brings it to a fault a little bit. Overall series, though, I'd say a 9 out of 10. I really don't have much to complain about at all. So, what do you think?
Good deal. So, 9 out of 10 for Matt. Yeah, for me, we could talk at length about some of the criticisms and some of the things that this show did that was separate from the lore and whatnot, and why things happened the way that they happened. And a lot of fans out there just simply do not like the show. I think a lot of people gave up on it as well, and because they think that it's not Lord of the Rings, that it's not part of Tolkien's narrative at all. And a lot of people, you saw that one comment that we had on the last episode. A lot of people do feel that way.
Yeah.
And I can't really fault them, but at the same time, and a lot of people talk about, it's like, oh man, I wish that Netflix or HBO got this. But have you heard of the pitches that Netflix and HBO had for their Lord of the Rings shows? No. Okay, let's talk about those. So if I can't remember which one was which, but here's the two pitches that they had from HBO and Netflix. One of them was a Gandalf and Aragorn show, so they were just going to follow the adventures of Gandalf and Aragorn. And
buddy cop comedy.
Yeah. And the other pitch that the Tolkien estate heard was that they were just going to remake the Lord of the Rings completely.
That's what I had initially heard. I actually did hear that one back.
So those were those two pitches, and Amazon's was the other pitch where they were going to present this whole story from back in the Second Age. So out of those three stories, the one I'm most interested the most is this Amazon story. Now, since Amazon won this over, and they got it because they were able to spend the most amount of money and give the Tolkien estate the most amount out of the three, out of HBO, Netflix, and Amazon, they were able to buy it out. But out of those three, that's the story I wanted to hear. But in buying it like that, they couldn't legally have things from Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings in there. The one thing that they did try to do in the beginning, when they were first developing the show a few years ago, was they reached out to Peter Jackson. And Peter Jackson was like, sure, I want to see some scripts, so if you could send me some scripts, I'll go ahead and read them, and we'll see where we can go from there. So he was kind of excited and wanted to come on board for this show. And so Amazon went away, and what Peter Jackson said was they never came back with any of those scripts, so I was fine. And I thought, hey, you guys can do what you want. That's all good. And he was happy to just be a viewer of this show. But the reason why, and I've read up on this too, the reason why Amazon didn't send him any scripts or anything like that, because they were very, very worried about the legal repercussions. They were very worried repercussions about the legal repercussions of having him on board and it being too close to the Lord of the Rings, because that's owned by New Line Cinema and I believe Warner Brothers as well, right? So they had to toe that line where they couldn't use that material because they could get sued by Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema. So it's a very a fine line, tightrope type of situation that they have to walk with these characters that are established that we can't make exactly like they were. And we have to appease the fans, and we have to tell a very genuine story as well that's entertaining and insightful and rich. And I think with all that said, with all the very hoops and things that they had to get through, it is amazing that we got a story that was halfway good out of this. It's amazing that we got anything at all, that we have a Lord of the Rings show that I very much do enjoy, that I very much like, and I do have my critiques too, and I wish that we could have used all the materials. I wish the Tolkien estate would have allowed them to use all the materials available.
For $265 million, you think that they got the whole thing.
Right,
but...
yeah. And so I wish that they were able to, but they weren't. And this is the show that we got, and I think that they did a phenomenal job. And for that, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. I think on average, that's around where I've landed when it comes to our ratings for the show throughout the season. I very much enjoyed it. I think that the writing on the show was decent. I thought it was very good. I know that there's people out there that say that the show is terribly written. I don't see that. I don't see that in what we've gotten. Emotionally, it has affected me. I felt different after these episodes. I felt, hopeful, which is something I love when I'm coming out of a show that I truly enjoy. And I love the ride. I love where it's going. So, 8 out of 10 for me. I'm glad that we got this. I'm more glad that we got this than if we didn't. So, and it was a much better idea than HBO's and Netflix. So,
right. Yeah, I kind of equate it to, I'm a huge fan of the Back to the Future trilogy.
Me too.
If they made a Back to the Future prequel or Back to the Future 4, I would probably be upset just reading about the news that was on the horizon,
Right?
So I can understand the fans that are super invested in wanting this to be the exact thing that Tolkien wrote on screen.
And I'm same way with Star Wars as well. Like with George Lucas, I'm like, if that's not George Lucas's vision, I really don't like it that much. So I totally understand, because I'm that way with Star Wars, and there are definitely fans like that for Tolkien.
Yeah.
And you have every reason to be upset about this and not like it. So I agree, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't find it to be the fault of these writers and creators and directors and actors. So to me, it's kind of like they did a really amazing job with what they have. Yeah. And do I find that entertaining? I can find that entertaining. For people that just cannot get past those boundaries and limitations that these people had whenever they were creating this show, then it's not going to be entertaining.
Right.
And they're not going to like it. So that's okay.
Yep.
This is all meant to be fun and entertaining.
It's entertainment.
Anyway.
It's all fantasy. It's supposed to be fun, guys.
Yeah. So so a 9 out of 10 for me overall, an 8 out of 10 from you overall. So ultimately, it sounds like we're both excited for season 2 and thought they did pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm probably gonna watch this season finale one more time. Rewatchability is up there too for me, and I very much enjoyed that. Yep. And for all you guys out there too, if you enjoyed this show, and you read the books and everything else, you are definitely a Tolkien fan. Don't let anybody tell you that you're anything otherwise than that. If you enjoy this stuff, you don't even have to read the books. And if you enjoyed Lord of the Rings and you enjoyed this, you're a Lord of the Rings fan. There's no gatekeeping. And especially here at Fatherly Fandom, you're never going to be told that you're not a true fan.
Absolutely.
Because you liked something. So if you're one of those folks that goes out there and points a finger and is like, hey, you are not a true fan because you like the show, or you're not a true fan because you support this, that's bullshit, and we don't represent that here at Fatherly Fandom. We wanna bring a positivity to all these fan bases.
All inclusive.
And yeah, we want to be as inclusive as possible with this. It's okay if you don't like it, and if you have your critiques, you can always share those with us in the comments that you have. But please do not rag on other people or tell people that they're not true fans of this stuff just because they enjoy this material. We're here to have fun with this and enjoy this stuff as much as we can, highlight the good. And I'm always a fan of lighting a candle rather than cursing the darkness. So that's my mentality, and I believe that was Tolkien's mentality too in writing this stuff. He wanted to bring a little hope into these stories. So let's do the same.
That's exactly the point of all of his writing, and the point of this show, and the point of the old movies. So yeah, in that vein, we want to hear everybody's opinion, good or bad, and we consider everybody a part of it.
Right.
Fun to be a part
It
of.
is.
Fun to talk about this stuff.
Right? Even the bad
whether
stuff.
you'd liked it or didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we all enjoy it here. So thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't and you like this stuff, subscribe to our show. I might be shaving my head if we get to 100 subscribers. I will be. I will shave my head if we get to 100 subscribers. So thanks for joining us for Rings of Power. It's a lot of fun. When season 2 happens, we'll be covering that. We're covering Andor, as well as House of the Dragon, as well as She-Hulk. We just covered the last finale of that. We got Tales of the Jedi coming up in Spooktober. We got Hereditary heading on our way for a review on Sunday. So lots of fun things coming up here at Fatherly Fandom. So join us for all those things. And do we have anything else before we depart these lands of Middle-earth, brother?
I don't think so. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Heading for the
it's time to
shores of
sign out.
Valinor until the next season comes up. So
That's right.
we'll probably have to
Yeah.
jump off the ship and swim back to Middle-earth at that point. Hopefully we don't meet.
I'm not that good a swimmer. I only dog paddle.
Yeah. Well, Matt might not make it for the next season, but I'll be here for sure. So thanks for joining us, guys, and from our families to yours.
Have a good one.
Adios.